The first thing you learn as a fire lookout, even before you learn how to read a compass or spot a smoke plume from 20 miles away, is the profound silence of the forest. Not the kind of silence you find in a library or even a deserted street early in the morning. This is a silence that hums, a living, breathing absence of man-made noise, punctuated only by the rustle of leaves, the distant call of a hawk, or the frantic chittering of a squirrel. It's a silence that, after a few weeks, starts to feel less like an absence and more like a presence. Watching. My name is Alex, and for the past 3 seasons, I've been stationed at Fire Lookout Tower 72, deep within the Clearwater National Forest. This isn't a story about a raging wildfire or a heroic rescue. This is a story about the things that move when no one is supposed to be watching. The secrets the forest holds, and the unsettling truth I discovered about my own isolated profession. My posting at Tower 72 began like any other. The initial training was rigorous, focusing on fire suppression techniques, map reading, radio communication, and the intricate bureaucracy of National Park Service protocols. There were binders full of regulations, emergency contact lists, and detailed guides on identifying various types of smoke. What they didn't prepare you for, what no manual could ever truly convey, was the sheer, unadulterated solitude. My tower was a steel skeleton rising 80 feet above the tree line, topped with a small glass-enclosed cabin. Inside, a cot, a small propane stove, a 2-way radio, and a fire finder. A circular map with a sighting device were my only companions. My nearest neighbor was another lookout, Emily, at Tower 68, a good 30 miles as the crow flies, and even further by any discernible trail. Communication was sporadic, mostly limited to daily check-ins and reports on weather conditions. The vastness of the forest stretched out in every direction, an endless tapestry of green and brown, broken only by the occasional glint of a distant river or the jagged peaks of the Bitterroot Mountains. My daily routine was a rhythm of observation. I'd wake with the sun, scan the horizon with my binoculars, log weather data, and meticulously check for any signs of smoke. The days were long, punctuated by the simple tasks of survival: cooking dehydrated meals, maintaining my equipment, and reading through the worn paperbacks I'd brought with me. At night, the forest transformed. The vibrant greens and browns dissolved into shades of charcoal and indigo, and the familiar sounds of the day were replaced by a symphony of unseen creatures. Owls hooted, coyotes howled, and the wind whispered through the pines, a constant, low murmur that could play tricks on your ears. It was during these nights, in the impenetrable darkness, that the first anomalies began. It started subtly. A flicker of movement at the extreme edge of my peripheral vision, just beyond the reach of my cabin's single solar-powered lamp. I'd dismiss it as a trick of the light, a branch swaying in the wind, or the shadow of a passing bird. But these occurrences grew more frequent, more distinct. One evening, as I was charting a particularly bright star, I saw it. A dark, elongated shape, moving with an unnatural fluidity, glided between the dense pines about a mile to the west. It wasn't a bear, too tall. Not a deer, too broad, too deliberate in its motion. It seemed to flow rather than walk, a ripple in the fabric of the night. I grabbed my binoculars, my heart thudding against my ribs, but by the time I focused, it was gone, swallowed by the darkness. I told myself it was fatigue, the isolation playing tricks on my mind. After all, what else could it be? The forest was home to all sorts of wildlife. The next few weeks were a battle against my own skepticism. I started keeping a log, not just of weather and smoke, but of these unusual sightings. Date, time, approximate location, a brief description. The entries painted a disturbing picture. The Koisa, as I'd started to call it in my head, seemed to favor the western ridge, a particularly dense and rarely visited section of the forest. Its movements were always silent, always swift, and always just beyond clear observation. It was never in the same spot twice, but its general area of activity remained consistent. I tried to rationalize it. A lone wolf? A large elk? But the descriptions in my log contradicted these possibilities. Too tall, moves like smoke, not animalistic. These were the phrases I found myself writing, each one deepening the unease. One particularly moonless night, the activity intensified. I was attempting to fix a stubborn shortwave radio antenna on the cabin's small exterior platform when I heard it. A faint, rhythmic thumping coming from directly below the tower. It wasn't the heavy tread of a large animal, more like something striking the steel supports. Thump, thump, thump. Slow, deliberate, and growing closer. My blood ran cold. I froze, pressing myself against the glass of the cabin, peering down into the inky blackness. I couldn't see anything, but the sound was unmistakable, resonating through the metal structure beneath my feet. It felt like whatever was down there was testing the tower, assessing it. I scrambled back inside, locking the trapdoor that led to the stairs, my hands trembling. I spent the rest of the night huddled on my cot, listening to the forest, every creak and rustle magnified by my fear. The thumping eventually stopped, but the memory of it, the raw, primal terror it evoked, lingered like a phantom limb. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done before. I radioed Emily at Tower 68. Our conversations were usually brief, factual. This time, my voice was tight with a fear I tried to mask. "Emily," I began, Have you ever encountered anything unusual out there? Anything, not on the species list?" There was a long pause on the other end, the static crackling like dry leaves. "Unusual, Alex. This is the wilderness. Every day is unusual." Her tone was light, but I detected a subtle shift, a guardedness. I pressed on, describing the silent movement, the unnatural fluidity, the thumping. Another pause, longer this time. "Alex," she finally said, her voice lower now, "you've been out there a while. The isolation can do things to you, make you see things." She wasn't denying it outright, but she wasn't confirming it either. It was a practiced deflection, a subtle dismissal that only solidified my suspicion. She knew something. The official protocols for fire lookouts are clear. Report anything out of the ordinary, maintain communication, prioritize fire detection. There are no protocols for unidentified shadowy figures or things thumping on your tower at night. This lack of official guidance was, in itself, unsettling. It suggested that either such phenomena were so rare they hadn't warranted inclusion, or, more disturbingly, that they were known but deliberately omitted. I began to scour the few historical documents I had access to in my cabin, old logbooks from previous lookouts, faded maps, and a dusty copy of the Clearwater National Forest history. Most of it was mundane, but one particular passage caught my eye. It was a brief, almost offhand mention from a lookout in the 1940s, a man named Silas Blackwood. He wrote, "The western ridge harbors a peculiar silence, even for these woods. Sometimes in the deepest dark one can feel eyes upon them, though no creature is visible to the naked eye." The old-timers spoke of shadow walkers, but I put no stock in such superstitions. Shadow walkers. The term resonated with a chilling accuracy. My research deepened. I focused on local folklore, historical accounts of the region, anything that might shed light on what I was experiencing. I found scattered references to forest spirits and ancient guardians among the indigenous tribes who once inhabited the area. These were often depicted as tall, silent figures, protectors of the land, sometimes appearing as omens, sometimes as warnings. While I was wary of attributing my sightings to supernatural entities, the consistency of the descriptions across different cultures and eras was striking. It wasn't just my imagination. Others had seen something similar. As the season progressed, the encounters became bolder. Okoiza no longer stayed a mile away. I would catch glimpses of it closer, sometimes just at the edge of the tree line, its form still indistinct, but its presence undeniably menacing. It wasn't aggressive, not overtly, but its sheer proximity was a form of psychological assault. It felt like a deliberate act of surveillance, a testing of boundaries. One afternoon, as a storm rolled in, painting the sky a bruised purple, I saw it clearly for the first time. Not its full form, but enough. It was tall, impossibly so, easily 8 or 9 feet, slender and dark, its surface appearing to absorb the light rather than reflect it. There were no discernible features, no eyes, no mouth, just a towering humanoid silhouette against the darkening trees. It stood perfectly still, observing my tower, observing me. A shiver that had nothing to do with the dropping temperature ran down my spine. This was no animal. This was something else entirely. The fear was constant now, a low hum beneath the surface of my daily tasks. I started sleeping with my binoculars next to me, my radio within arm's reach. Every creak of the tower, every rustle of leaves, sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I was trapped, 80 feet above the ground, in a glass cage, watching and being watched. The silence of the forest, once a comfort, had become a suffocating shroud. It was then, in the suffocating quiet of Tower 72, that a new, terrifying possibility began to form in my mind. What if the Shadow Walkers weren't just folklore? What if they were real? And what if their presence was intrinsically linked to the fire lookout system itself? I thought back to Emily's guarded response, the subtle hints in Silas Blackwood's log. What if the solitude wasn't just a byproduct of the job, but a deliberate design? What if the lookouts weren't just there to spot fires, but to serve another purpose, an unseen function in a larger, darker system? I considered the history of fire lookouts, often isolated, often in remote, wild areas, perfect places for something to operate unseen, to exist on the fringes of human perception. And what if the Shadow Walkers were more than just passive observers? What if they were guardians? And what if the fires we were meant to prevent were not just natural occurrences, but something else entirely? Something they were trying to contain, or perhaps something they were trying to signal. The thought was a cold, sharp blade. It explained the consistent activity on the western ridge, the dense, rarely visited section of the forest. Perhaps that was their territory, their domain. It explained the thumping on the tower, not an act of aggression, but a warning, a territorial display. And it explained the gradual escalation of their presence, a message being sent, growing clearer with each sighting. I wasn't just a fire lookout, I was an intruder, or perhaps a witness to something I was never meant to see. One morning, just before the end of my season, a small, controlled burn was scheduled several miles to the east. It was a routine procedure designed to clear underbrush and prevent larger fires. As I watched the smoke rise, a familiar dread settled upon me. Okoiza appeared on the western ridge, closer than ever. It stood there, motionless, a dark sentinel against the orange glow of the distant burn. But this time it wasn't just observing, it seemed to be reacting. There was a subtle shift in its form, a ripple that traveled through its dark silhouette as if the very air around it was disturbed. It was almost as if the fire, even a controlled one, agitated it. Later that day, as I was preparing my final report for the season, a small, unmarked envelope was delivered to my tower by the supply ranger, a rare personal delivery. Inside was a single, faded photograph. It was old, black and white, depicting a group of early 20th century fire lookouts standing in front of a tower, strikingly similar to mine. But in the background, at the very edge of the frame, partially obscured by a tree, was a tall, dark, indistinct shape. It was unmistakably similar to what I had been seeing. On the back of the photo, scrawled in faint, spidery handwriting, were two words: "They watch." No sender, no explanation, just those two chilling words. The ranger who delivered the photo, a gruff, silent man named Miller, was already halfway down the trail when I opened the envelope. I shouted after him, "Miller, where did this come from?" He paused, turning slowly. His eyes, usually unreadable behind his sunglasses, met mine. There was a weary understanding in them, a knowledge that transcended the simple duties of a park ranger. "Some things," he said, his voice low, "have been here longer than any of us. Some things, they just are." He then turned and continued his descent, leaving me alone with the photograph and the profound, unsettling truth it revealed. My time as a fire lookout eventually came to an end. I packed my meager belongings, descended the 80 feet of steel stairs for the last time, and left Tower 72 behind. But the forest and what moves within it never truly left me. I found other jobs, tried to resume a normal life, but the silence of the woods, the image of that towering, dark silhouette, the words "they watch," they are etched into my memory. I often wonder about Emily, about Miller, about Silas Blackwood, and all the other lookouts who stood sentinel in those isolated towers, witnessing the unseen. Were they all part of it? Were they all aware? The truth about fire lookouts, about the desolate beauty of the wilderness, is far more complex and terrifying than any official manual could ever convey. We are not just guardians against fire. We are witnesses, silent observers of an ancient, hidden world that coexists with our own. A world that stirs and moves in the deepest shadows, watching us from between the trees. And sometimes it lets us know it's there, a subtle reminder that we are not alone, and that some secrets are too vast, too ancient, to ever truly be understood. The next time you see a distant fire lookout tower standing stoic against the horizon, remember this story. Remember the silence. Remember the darkness. And remember, something out there is always watching. Because the forest at night holds secrets, and some of them, once seen, can never be unseen. If this story has left you with a chill and you're curious about other hidden truths and unexplained phenomena, consider subscribing to Nightfall Tales. We delve into the shadows so you don't have to navigate them alone.